club is one of those activities that many of us enjoy hosting around our warm tables at home. And today on my warm table, I have an excellent recommendation for your next book club or book gift. I'm delighted to be speaking with author, speaker, and lived adversity expert Mark Berridge on his very personal book, A Fraction Stronger. It's a book Mark never imagined he would write. Mark's high-powered corporate career came to an abrupt end in March 2019 following a very serious cycling accident. It fractured his identity and triggered a personal battle to regain his mobility and reimagine a different life with new meaning. A Fraction Stronger is an inspirational book about facing adversity with a positive spirit, intentional actions, and a can-do attitude. Mark, welcome to my warm table.
Thank you, Sonia. Absolute pleasure to be here.
Mark, your book opens in the beachside town in WA of Geraldton, where you spent what seems like an idyllic childhood. Tell us about your roots in Western Australia.
Yeah, we had a couple of stints at Geraldton. So my parents were school teachers, and as happens for school teachers, they tend to travel around country Western Australia as they work their way up the chain of command. And I think I was in Geraldton until I was about 5 years old, and lots of idyllic memories of going to the beach as a really young individual. And then we went back again from when I was 10 till 13. Yeah, great experiences, and I guess I see myself as a very beach-oriented person as a result of that. I did try and persevere with surfing once I went to Albany, but I think eventually the idea of being, wetsuited all the time, and it just got too much for me. But yeah, very much a beachside person, I think, and I still miss those WA beaches. Mainly grew up in country Western Australia. We did have a period of time in Rollystone up in the hills of Perth, which was beautiful as well. Lots of great memories from being up there. And then, because I finished high school at Albany Senior High School on the south coast, went off to UWA State at St Columba College. Great experience of university and living there. Had a few years living up in Hong Kong in my mid-20s, then moved to Brisbane after that, and largely been here since, although we had a few years in Singapore as well.
Your childhood and your early adulthood was spent here in Western Australia, and now I'm speaking to you via Zoom. Our warm table experience includes a cup of coffee today, but sadly we can't be together because you're now in Brisbane. There was this high-powered career that I sort of alluded to at the start, where you were working for a mining giant, as they're often called in the media. And we won't dwell on that side because you've very much reinvented yourself since those days, Mark. And tell me how that came to be. Tell me about March 2019.
Yeah, well, I was still working for that mining giant on a consulting basis the day that I had my accident. Like many people, trying to juggle that fitness and headspace that you get out of doing physical activity. And for me, cycling had become my love. I played a lot of hockey, but my knees had basically gone, and therefore my hockey career had gone, and cycling was my new outlet. I was probably doing about 250 Ks per week. I was scheduled to be flying to Salt Lake City that night for work, and unfortunately crashed at early hours of the morning. So I'm just coming down through a corner. The bike understeered through the corner, hit a bit of a dent in the road. Had to make a controlled crash decision. Thought, there's a park in front of me. That's a better option than the alternatives. I'll crash into the park. But unfortunately, I found a big stormwater drain that was a bit over 1.6 metres below ground level. So I've catapulted myself into that stormwater drain. I think my helmet's clipped the bluestone rockery on the edge of that drain, or towards the bottom of the drain, and that sent the force of my collision into my spine. So I had 5 fractured bones, so left scapula, 3 ribs, left wrist, but most materially I crushed 2 vertebrae. One went down to 40% of its original height, so T12, which is sort of out the middle of your back, and a piece of that unfortunately went into my spinal cord. So incredible pain at the point in time, just trying my best to stay calm. And it was only later in hospital that I realised quite the extent of my injuries, of course.
In your book, A Fraction Stronger, you talk about the thinking that went through your mind as you were stuck in the ditch, and you had that terrible pain. And that's one of the more really inspirational starts to that story, Mark, is that, again, I'm going to gush a little bit because your story is so inspirational. Despite, what you've gone through, you've really offered up this belief and possibility in the impossible moments, which is, sort of on the front page of your book. And every little hurdle was what you sort of focused on. Just, this is where I am right this moment, and this is the hurdle I need to get through. So lying in the ditch there, sort of having had this very serious cycling accident, but not necessarily understanding just how serious it was at the time, your focus was just on the next moment and the next moment and the next moment until the paramedics arrived.
Yeah, I think with anything, you've always got a series of time horizons you've got to deal with. So once they'd let me know that they'd called the ambulance, which they did, well, I think actually the first voice I heard was, I'm calling the ambulance, Barrow. So the cycling, I was lucky enough to be cycling with 8 other guys, and straight onto it, they've made that call. So obviously, in that moment, my time horizons are waiting for that ambulance, and that could have been, and it ended up being quite a while. So I can't deal with that uncertainty of that time horizon, that point in time. So all I've got to concentrate is on, okay, how do I just breathe and do the things I can control? I can't control how long that ambulance takes to get to me, and the pain is unbearable. What can I do now? And so it was really just, the first point was this: how do I slow things down for myself and breathe and not get panicked, not get too concerned about what might come on the other side of that ambulance journey or anything like that. And the most important thing at that point in time for me was to try and stay as calm as possible and breathe and get to that next hurdle, which was, I guess I saw it as being the ambulance arriving. It turned out that the hurdle of how do we get me out of the ditch to even get me in the ambulance, which of course I had no idea I was in a ditch. It was only 4 weeks later when I went back and saw the extent of the ditch did I understand what I'd actually landed in. And I had no idea that the reason why it took so long for me to get into the ambulance and get going was they had to problem solve and how to get me out of the ditch. So I think sometimes it really does help, because you're not really fully aware of the situation around you. How do you just focus on the things you could control? And at that point in time, I could control, how do I react to this situation? How do I control my breathing? What are more, for want of a better phrase, normal things for me? So how do I problem solve the fact that I'm missing my flight tonight to Salt Lake City? Is there another way I might get there if everything goes well? And how do I try and utilize some humor, I guess, which was relatively typical of me, of just things that help me, I just still be myself in that moment of otherwise could have spiraled into panic.
And that opens up another really big lesson in your book that I found, actually, because the concept of ambiguity, this idea of we spend so much energy trying to find the certain in life. And in fact, there are so many aspects of our world these days, because it's become so complex, or we really like a decision and we really like certainty, but ambiguity is actually really pervasive in everything that surrounds us. And you talk about ambiguity a lot, and I found that particularly helpful, just from not from a health point of view, but just from a business point of view, even just to be really comfortable in the ambiguity, and that the ambiguity actually opens up possibilities. So I really liked your take on that.
I would say that there's elements of the way my mother in particular, tackled life, being very creative. I think she probably liked that possibility and just seeing what could be achieved, and was very open thinking. So that must have helped a lot. But I think also my career definitely helped. Always being at in sales and marketing, that sort of revenue end of the business, I was very focused on what's the opportunity here. So often we can get concerned about our situation, and that fear will almost always drive us back towards certainty. But certainty may not actually help us deal with that fear, that tension. We do need some level of certainty. We do need, I guess, understand our own core values. And there are things that it makes real sense when we're making a plan, the way we might tackle it. But at the same time, having that open mind to adjust and to look for the opportunity when things aren't quite going as you planned is so critical as well. And to me, I think that ability to manage those two things together, not just chase for certainty and, okay, what's wrong with me? What does this mean? How do I deal with this? And try and Google and get a very prescriptive answer to my situation. I think that really helped me, that I was just able to sort of take it from moment to moment and listen to both medical experts, which were so important to me through the journey, but also to challenge that and, well, what else might I be able to achieve? What's my situation?
And that was your negotiation skills, wasn't it, Mark? Because you talked about that from your marketing background and from your international career, that, negotiation skills were one of those key things that you always needed to use with customers and clients to actually see, well, what's possible, where can we get to? And you really tapped into those negotiation skills, and even with working with your health professionals to say, okay, well, what can I do and what is possible and what am I allowed to do?
And there's real elements of, I think persuasion is a really valuable skill as well, and it's related to negotiation without being quite the same time. So the times I had to persuade myself to do things, the book is an example of that. Persuade myself that being vulnerable and sharing all the things that happened to me in my book, as uncomfortable as it might be for me, if I really want to help people, there's more value in me actually sharing all of my story than hiding parts of it that I'm uncomfortable to share. So there's elements of persuasion and elements of absolute trading in what I had to do to achieve. And Lucy, my wife, she was really important with one of those early in terms of which hospital I was going to next. That was an important negotiation because at that point in time, I just felt so broken in that first week about what next. I was quite happy to acquiesce and go wherever that particular hospital wanted me to go next, whereas Lucy was very much going, hang on, there's a number of different things at play here, and was really good at getting me into a hospital that was much closer to us at home, therefore closer to my friends' support. And given, I ended up being there far longer than I ever would have expected. I probably hoped to be out of there in 2 weeks, was out of there in 6. That was really, really important in her ability to deal with that one. But me personally, the negotiation around my orthotic device that they put on my foot was a really key one. I had a number of medical influences around me in the hospital, some of the physios, certainly the spinal specialist team that really wanted me to wear this orthotic because I was going to have to wear it the rest of my life. And I'm thinking, well, I don't want to wear it the rest of my life. If I start wearing it now in week 4, I am more likely to be wearing it the rest of my life. How do I find a way to give you what you want, which is wearing it some of the time, but being allowed to not wear it some of the time as well, so that there is this hope of me getting movement back in my left foot and being able to have a more normal walking gait in the future, I'm not closing the door on that. So, we came up with this, I guess, the trading of when I would wear it and how I would wear it, which enabled both those two interests to be protected. Because they wanted me to be safe, and they didn't really expect me to regain much movement in that foot. I wanted to be able to regain my long-term movement. So, how do you understand the drivers of why they're pushing for that? They're pushing for it for my safety. Okay, well, what situations am I unsafe? How do I make sure I'm wearing it in the situations where you think I'm going to be unsafe? Where I'm in a really safe position, I'm in the gym with the other physios, surely I can not wear it there so that we can maximise my recovery.
Mindset is such a big part of what you talk about in A Fraction Stronger, that it's having a vulnerability to be open to assistance in every aspect of your life, but it's also having that real positivity to make choices. You use the word choice a lot in the early pages of your book.
I haven't searched how often I use choice, but I was definitely, again, perhaps back to persuasion, I was definitely trying to persuade myself, you can tackle this. I know you're feeling pretty bleak at these early hours, and so often I was, but you can tackle this, and it's a choice. Other people have made choices. Look what they've achieved through the choices they might have made from harder positions. And so that element of choice was fundamental to, I guess, the way I drove my mindset. And then we joke that the next book will be mostly follows instructions because, I don't always follow instructions perfectly, as my wife would particularly note. The idea being that I absolutely listened and took on board what people had to tell me. I also tried to push the boundaries a little bit more because I wanted more. I was really hungry for maximising how I might come out of what was a really difficult situation.
One of those reasons that you wanted to maximise everything is that your identity was so challenged at that moment in time. You have an identity as a father, as a professional, as a husband, as a cycling buddy. Your identity had been fractured, as we said earlier. So I guess that was a huge motivator for you.
Totally. So I'm displaced from all those things, what I would call those embers of yourself, or that understanding of your values and what's really core and important to you. And I'm desperately fighting for them back. So I'm using them as part of this persuasion or this driver for myself of how do I tackle this difficult situation. And so, yes, that all of those wonderful things that are around me, through my life, the memories I've managed to gather from having a great life and wonderful family, all of those things I associated with helping our busy family get through their weekends of sport and other things rather than suddenly not being able to participate in those because it's just too hard to take me potentially. That's the sort of vision I had. And it seems overblown now, but in the early days, I certainly had this vision of suddenly I'm not part of those activities because it's just too hard to be involved anymore, or I'm only involved in select activities because it's just too hard to be involved to the same extent as before. And so I was using all of that definitely to drive myself. And you start to make life much more rewarding for the health professionals that are putting all this effort into helping you. You are giving the opportunity of coming back to where you were before. And I could see around me that there was other patients that just didn't quite have those same drivers, that same ability. And I guess the idea of the book is definitely how do I encourage a few people to try a bit harder, a bit longer, and realise that there's value in doing so, because not only will their life be better, but the health professionals that treat them will be better. The people around them that love them will be, will have a better life. And how do we create that belief that I managed to generate by imagining what other people have done around me? I guess how do we replicate that more often for more people?
And it absolutely does that, Mark. I've passed this book on to friends of mine who've experienced traumatic health issues, and feedback that's already come back from one of them has been, it gave me hope. Rehabilitation is hard. It's boring, and it's consistently, you don't feel like you're making any traction. It gets a bit stale. And having read your book, it really inspired this particular friend of mine to just have that hope and say, no, it's just a fraction stronger. And that's what I was saying to you when we first spoke, Mark, that I love the title because it resonates deeply with, I think, everybody. Even when we talk about our own fitness, just a fraction stronger, a fraction, every little step in the right direction is something to celebrate. It's in the right, you're heading in the right way.
Celebrate. We don't celebrate our little gains enough, because all of those little gains, those fractions of gains, they compound. They help us get to the next. They might even open the door for the next step change. Certainly that happened to me in my recovery journey. It is all about those fractions building on each other and creating the gain. So absolutely, I wanted people to pick up the book and feel like I could understand and to value and to celebrate more small gains and small targets. We talked before about the ditch and just breathe, just get through the moment. That's a goal. Like celebrating, that's actually worth celebrating. If you're in that situation with that much amount of pain and you can stay relatively calm through it, you should be proud of that. Look back on it if you've achieved that, and people will have, that'll be listening to this, have achieved things like that. I guess so often, most of us, we're setting ourselves pretty high expectations in life all the time. So we then look at the gap. What have we fallen short of, and how do we improve and narrow that gap to what our expectation was of ourselves or what we were going to achieve in life? And we do spend a lot of time focused on that area of shortfall, and therefore we don't always celebrate just how much I have achieved, particularly if it was towards a really strong target. But it doesn't really matter, even if it's just a small mini target. How do I go on that? What was my attitude? Can I just celebrate the attitude I applied to this? That's quite a simple thing that we can hold ourselves account to. That's a little bit strong. Just really celebrate it and go, right, I said I would give this my best shot, and I did. I'm going to celebrate that. I'm going to celebrate what I learned, even if I didn't achieve what I wanted to achieve out of this.
And you've got a lot of those sorts of little questions that you pose at the end of each chapter, Mark, to really get us thinking about, well, what was our attitude and where have we taken a moment to celebrate, and what are our goals and how do we imagine ourselves in our daily life and in what gives us meaning. You actually have these little thought starters and conversation points at the end of each chapter, which I found really helpful and really useful. And I think, coming back to the book club theme, people were going to use A Fraction Stronger as a book club book. There's some terrific conversation starters in there.
It's, those questions in the chapter, I think, probably started out of my book coach's idea, and certainly something I worked on hard with my editor, Brooke Lyons, was amazing in terms of how do we get those, because I think there's something I inherently did during my own recovery, was thinking about, okay, I'm feeling really crappy in this moment about that bit of news. Okay, how do I find a way to turn that around? I think about what I have achieved so far, or what did I do well, and okay, what's one thing I can do well? How do I just do that now?
I'd like to take us back and explore this idea of embers, because that's something that you talk a lot about in your book, Mark. And I really love that idea of the embers as you describe them, as these warm memories, those core values that define you, the key people, the friends and the family who bring meaning to your world, and how you want to show up for them and how you want to front up in the world. And all those little fractions of moments and memories and people and places, they're stoking this warm fire that you talk about. It's just a beautiful analogy, but it was really, really meaningful for me.
It probably came out of the first attempts to generate a keynote speech. And I was really thinking about what were the fundamental things I did in terms of this idea of generating hope and possibility and focusing on it. And I really felt that I was illuminating hope, and I was trying to do lots of things that would illuminate, which later, thanks to Birds of Tokyo, became lanterns. And
Yes.
and lanterns, angels, and demons works as the three sections of the book. So I like that, the two-syllable nature of those three sections. So it was a logical change. But back to illumination, the idea that you do have I guess the horizon, the possibility, and this vision of these big things that we might aim for. And sometimes we do hold up this spotlight and just think we need to just have this big vision and only a vision. But sometimes the pathway is broken and it's dark and it's hard. And it doesn't have to have light only from above, it can have light from below. And that was what was really making me think about this idea of embers, the coals in a fire, the stuff that might help you find that pathway, but isn't coming from this lighthouse or this light on the hill or this beacon of hope that is coming from some other way. And that really made me think of the idea of embers and all that sense of identity inside you, and something that might look like it's not much. Be, now just coals that are almost look like they're laying cold, and particularly when as fractured as I was feeling those first few weeks, but just by reflecting on them, by putting some little bit of energy into them, they've got an amazing amount of warmth and light that will help steer you down that pathway of hope. And I think that was really the crux of why I came up with that embers idea. So yes, it was, for me, it was the sense of my identity, both in a working career, but more importantly around my family and my family unit, of how could I contribute to that? How would I continue to enjoy the last section of my life in the way that I hoped just a few days before I was going to enjoy it, not in the way that I was currently feeling like it looked. The things inside you, the values that you can, how you can show up, and the attitude you can take to the game, as we've discussed before. For me, finding lighter moments and a bit of humour, which is something I guess I'd always tried to do as a leader or in difficult work situations when things were looking a bit harder. How do I find a way just to keep it a bit more real and just take the edge off it, putting it back in perspective, really, by having a little bit of light humour. That sense of humour, or attempted sense of humour, as my children would say, is a integral part of who I am as a person. So I definitely tried to channel those things I could still connect with, despite my physical nature not being what it was just a few days before.
So it's really tapping into the core values as you describe them, and what's going to make life bearable in the short term, what's going to make life meaningful for the long-term journey, and also how do you reframe and reimagine your life going forward. And I guess there's that element of grieving what you can't do anymore and grieving who you were. Like, can you take us through some of that journey? Because I think that's very real for people who have had a serious accident that is life-changing.
Well, I'll build into that by saying, yes, exactly the things you said, and that element of control. You can control how you connect to your memories and your sense of identity inside you, and what parts of that you can still do. Because if you don't have some sense of control by focusing on the bits of it that you can still connect with, then yes, all your focus is going to be on these bits you can't do. And if you start focusing on all these bits that you aren't anymore and the bits you can't do anymore, well, where's all your energy going? It's backwards and into that, lamentation of things lost. And I definitely had periods where that was impacting me. And sometimes it took Lucy or others to shake me out of it. There's a bit in the book that's I talk about quite often in terms of Lucy buying me this "I'm sorry" button because I was so busy apologising to the family what had happened to me all the time. And she bought me a mood diary, and I'm thinking, I don't need this crap. What did it cost? Probably $40. I'm thinking, I'm injured, I'm in hospital, I'm not earning anymore, I don't know what's happening in my life in the future. Why are we spending money on this crap? And it's $40. It's not that much in the context of our lives, fortunately. But for somehow that's the way I responded to it initially, and it took me a couple of days to realise just how powerful that was. But in making me focus on how often I was apologising for something that couldn't be undone, that it was draining energy from me.
That little mood diary was one of those little flip charts, wasn't it? That said, today I'm feeling,
correct.
fuzzy, or I'm feeling fabulous, or I'm feeling optimistic, or I'm feeling.
And I wasn't feeling
crazy.
amicable when I received the mood diary, that's for sure. What was the first word? Addled, I think. And
Addled.
I don't think I'd ever much used addled in a sentence, certainly not in any serious context. And I thought, yeah, I do feel damn addled at the moment as I'm lying here in hospital. Not quite the person I was before, and on a lot of painkillers and unable to move. So once I sort of come around, and then it became a sense of fun, and it actually became I couldn't physically flip the chart myself, so I'd have to ask other people, well, why don't you make an assessment of what you think I should be today?
I think that your wife Lucy is a very wise woman with the gifts that she gave you, Mark.
She did some incredible things during the whole journey. Really, really incredible. I'm very grateful for that. Overall, all the family and friends and hospital, it certainly does reinforce gratitude. And I think gratitude as well, reflecting on that, when you're feeling bad about yourself, can be another way of breaking, the cycle. And you're having those moments of focusing on what you can't do. Well, if you suddenly start focusing on the gratitude for the kindness and the care and the other things you are getting, again, it does help to start to redirect, to reframe that energy to a more productive space. And I can't keep up with my family when we're walking, particularly going to football seems to be the one that I notice the most when we're walking towards the Gabba. And I'll just fall behind a few meters, 10 meters, whatever, and I've always got to think to myself, the first thought's automatically, I can't help it, which is I hate falling behind, and I've just got attached to it every time, going, well, at least I'm walking with hope of improvement. So create your own mantras to attach to things to help you reframe when you've got those negative thoughts. But yes, something external like a mood diary can also help, because it makes you reflect on it. And once you're reflecting on what you're feeling and why, much more capable of creating that mantra that will help you address how you're feeling.
I asked if you would find a passage in the book to share with us on my warm table. Is there a passage somewhere in the book that you feel is really pertinent that you wanted to read for us?
Yeah, I thought I'd read a little bit about my time in PA hospital. So if I give some broad context, this stage it's basically a month post-injury. At the very start, I wasn't expecting to be admitted to the spinal unit of the hospital. So my spinal cord injury was severe, but not quite so severe as to go into the spinal unit, fortunately. But they came and assessed me, and they put me on the wait list for the spinal unit, which actually led to me being into this other hospital, the PA Garu unit. It was a pretty hard place to rehab in. And I would reach the point where I just wanted to be out and home. Then out of the blue, my main physio heard from one of her bosses that suddenly this boss had some capacity. So my physio, Lucy, so let's call her Physio Lucy to avoid the confusion.
I'll jump in there, Mark, and I'm just going to talk about the fact that the word Lucy means, light and illumination. And, you talk a lot about this sort of the embers and the light and the illumination. I think you were just surrounded by Lucy's in lots of different
ways. And Luke as well, our son, also similar. So, quite interesting that it's worked out that way, and, unwittingly in a way that I needed light and light all around me. And anyway, so Physio Lucy jumped on this opportunity to have this other lady, Leanne, work with me. So Leanne did some really interesting things at a point in time where I was grinding away with that rehab, and it can be hard, and just starting to give up that I was actually going to make much of a headway, because I just realised how hard it was to deal with the situation I was in, and it had become apparent that I needed a lot more treatment. Leanne would do these interesting things where she would, basically go, well, all your core muscles are so tight from having protected your spinal cord at the point of impact. We've got to find a way to get some movement back in there, because that's part of your problem. And you've forgotten how to use your feet. So I've got to retrain your feet. She'd have these specific exercises that she would do. So in this part of the book, we're leading into and talking about, she's just put me through some of these specific exercises, but I just wanted to pick up from there, if we will, if that's enough context. These steps were part of coaching me in the dynamics of walking. Because of my sensory disruption, my body had lost all sense of what to do. Together, Leanne and I would stand at the end of my little runway in the gym. Leanne wrapping one arm around my shoulders and the other arm applying bracing pressure at my waist, supporting the upper half of my body. Without that support, I had insufficient balance and strength to hold myself up. I was instructed to walk as fast as I could. As we walked in unison, I tried to concentrate on those specific neural pathways she had just stimulated, such as generating that heel strike. Leanne was physically directing my body to wake up nerve pathways to reconnect. It was scary, exhilarating, demoralizing, inspiring. I had limited controls of my legs and no control of my feet. They would smash into the ground as we walked as fast as I could. Slap, slap, slap. I ended up having 5 sessions with Leanne. At each session, Leanne would target 1 or 2 specific muscle areas for manipulation to stimulate the neural pathways disrupted by my spinal cord before we did our conjoined walking. It felt like quite the grandstand finish to me because of the way the treatment built up to those 6 or so laps down our 7-metre long runway. Typically, a few of the other physios or gym staff would be there watching, encouraging my effort and progression as I marched at the edge of control, relying on Leanne to keep me upright and safe. Our intertwined position and the slapping noise from my feet on the floor meant it provided an engaging spectacle. Leanne opened pathways. She showed me how to tackle my constraints, and she gave me reason to retest some assumptions. In those first days post-accident, I had hoped my apparent nerve damage was only temporary. But as time ground on, I learned just how slow and difficult progress was. I was starting to accept that the 12mm piece of vertebra may have indeed severed my spinal cord and my hopes. Leanne provided a different perspective on my damage than I'd received from the other specialists. She likened my body to a car that had violently crashed, where the wiring of that car had been loosened and the connections shaken free from their rightful place at the time of impact. Fortunately, our bodies are smart cars. There was hope of getting the car wiring working again, but I needed to stimulate the pathways to reconnect that wiring or relearn how to use the connections that were left behind. It provided hope versus the alternative hypothesis that the clean cut in my spinal cord meant the non-walking parts of my body were impacted forever. Leanne's intervention provided a vital step change to my progression. It liberated possibilities about the extent I might recover. Leanne's actions and perspectives brightened my belief about the outcomes I might achieve. And for those pathways that she and Physio Lucy opened for me, I'll be eternally grateful. To me, that's really important, both because I was starting to give up, but that intervention challenged my assumptions of what was possible at that point in time, probably at a point where I was losing my belief and hope of what was possible. So I guess, so many elements of gratitude, kindness, expertise, opportunity, and grabbing that opportunity when it comes, because quite often, particularly for us men of my age and era, but I think it's true of anyone, that proudness of, I'm not going to do that, I'm not going to grab that opportunity in that way. I'll find a way, I'm not going to do it. And if you don't grab those opportunities, then you miss this opportunity that might really make the difference for you. And I really feel that particular intervention by Leanne made a huge difference to how I was able to recover.
tell us where you're at now. So I'm looking at a very fit looking, raced down the stairs to get a parcel delivered for his daughter and came back up again and joined me. So look, I'm amazed at the recovery that, you've experienced, but tell us what you can do today.
Yeah, I can walk about 50% of the pace that I did before. Getting down off the ground to the ground and back up again is really hard. So I'm, definitely dealing with like niggly pain all the time and compromised mobility. But overall, extraordinarily fortunate. Sonia didn't mention that we had to, after I'd come back up the stairs, we had to wait 2 minutes before my breathing got back to normal. But
that's okay.
My leg strength's just not what it was for walking upstairs. But I'm very fortunate I can do stairs, and life in general is okay. It's I've got to be careful of not overdoing it. Come back to biting off more than you chew. I certainly in recovery, as you try to get back to work and you just, you associate with that identity. I did overdo it at different stages and cause other complications for myself. So, that is an ongoing challenge for me of how do I find that sense of identity and do rewarding work, but not create side effects for myself physically. But overall, very, very fortunate.
Mark, I've taken so much out of our conversation today. Look, the top tips I'm thinking here are, in the moment, just breathe and focus on what is immediately in your ability and power to control. Secondly, I've learned from you the idea of reframing negative emotions so that they are helping you and you're using your energy in the right channel rather than actually using it for something that may never happen or is not useful. That's a really important one, is that mindset. And the hope and the energy, the symbiotic relationship between hope and energy, the idea of being vulnerable, the idea that a broken body is not a broken person. And Mark, there are just so many lessons that A Fraction Stronger has reinforced for me, and I will continue buying it shamelessly for people and handing it on and hoping that it will make a great book club read for people who might be listening. But I'm just so thankful for your time, and I'm so glad that we connected. So Mark, wishing you every bit of success and joy as you move forward, becoming a fraction stronger every day and reaching your own goals and inspiring us to reach ours. Thank you.
Oh, much appreciated. Thank you, Sonia.
You've been listening to My Warm Table with Sonia Nolan. In Italian, a tavola calda is a warm and welcoming table where you can share big ideas, friendship, laughter and life. So much happens around the kitchen table, and I wanted to amplify it here in this podcast. My aim is to feed your mind and soul through smart conversations with heart. No topic is off limits, but good table manners rule. I hope you'll join us each week as we set the table for my extraordinary guests who will let you feast on their deep knowledge, life experiences, and wise insights. Let's keep the conversation flowing. Please subscribe to the My Warm Table podcast and share it with your friends and networks. Perhaps if they're new to podcasting, take a moment to show them how to download and subscribe so they don't miss an episode either. I'd also love you to join our community on Facebook. You'll find the group at My Warm Table Podcast. Your support is very much appreciated so that together we can eat, think, and be merry.